Floridians. They are incredible people. And I can tell you this without a shadow of a doubt, Ron and I would not be here if it were not for their contributions to be able to help support him along the way and everything that you've done. You know, to be honest, when I heard that I was getting this award, I said, "Are you sure you have the right DeSantis?" I was like, and then they said, yeah, no, you're going to get the award. And I said, this is great because I can come and talk to somebody older than 5, which is really exciting because we have an 8, 7, and 5-year-old at home. And, you know, an interesting story is, so Mamie, she was born, if you can believe this, during the 15 days to slow the spread. Do you remember this back in 2020? It's kind of like a blur. And now she's going to be 5 years old. So imagine what this was like when Mamie was being bored and Ron is on the phone bickering with Fauci, which I was in support of, but I'm in the delivery room and I'm trying to have a baby. And I'm like, great. And so, you know, but that's kind of been her introduction to the world, started with that. But now she's in kindergarten, and it's amazing to me just how quickly these last 7 years, if you can believe that, since he was elected, have just flown by. And you really think about it, I remember back in 2018, remember how that was such a nail-biter of an election? That governor's race was determined by 32,000 votes in a state of 22 million people, teetering on the brink of a radical leftist agenda or a bold conservative vision. And when we reflect upon that election here in Florida, it was probably one of the most consequential in Florida's history. I mean, imagine what this state would look like today had the Democrat opposition won at the time. But winning the election is important, but it's not sufficient. It is what matters. What is consequential is what you do with the opportunity to lead when it is presented to you. See, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second because I'm excited to be here, and they gave me a microphone, and again, I'm talking to people older than 5, which is awesome. So I've watched a lot of politicians over the years, I mean a lot. And for a lot of them, that's their goal, is to win the election. They want the position, they want the prestige, they want the power, maybe they want the parking, maybe they want the payoff. It's about ego or entitlement, whatever it may be. A lot of times it's about advancing themselves and not the will of the people. They want to be somebody, but don't have the courage, the backbone, or the will to do great things on behalf of the people, because true leadership is tough. For a lot of these politicians, standing up for righteousness, even if you're standing alone, is a bridge too far. And for some, there's no money in standing up for the right thing, and that is why the swamp is able to thrive. But when you are guided by certain enduring truths about our great American experiment, you understand the boldness of our Declaration of Independence, the genius of our Constitution and separation of powers, the philosophy of what it means to have a limited and defined government, the importance of the rule of law, and the non-negotiable understanding that our rights come from our Creator and that government is put in place to protect the rights that we innately have. When you understand that, and this is not going to sound First Lady-like, you'll fight like hell to protect it. And honestly, that's what I watched from the better half, from Ron. Fearless, courageous, unwavering, unrelenting for you, for me, for us, for families, for the free state, and ultimately what it means to be an American. And I'm not saying this because of my wife. Trust me, because I could have complaints about him bringing cookies home at 8:30 when I'm trying to put the kids to bed. But it's me saying this as someone who has had the very privileged and unique position watching one of the greatest governors of our time stand in the breach and fight when others took the path of least resistance. I've seen him fight a lot of battles in our time, and I'm still watching him fight battles, like one on property tax. You wouldn't why does that have to be a fight? And why is that a fight with Republicans? That should be low-hanging fruit. Everybody wants property tax reform. But issue after issue, from Martha's Vineyard to COVID to parental rights to universal school choice, I've watched this state transform into a conservative bastion of sanity and freedom. And the governor has really given me the opportunity to lead and spearhead initiatives really rooted in conservative principles. For instance, with Hope Florida, Pathway to Prosperity and Economic Self-Sufficiency, we've really reimagined and rethought how we approach welfare by incorporating the private sector, the nonprofits, the faith-based community to utilize and maximize resources exterior of government to help struggling Floridians. We have transitioned off more than 33,000 people from government assistance. That is saving the taxpayer over $100 million annually and over $1 billion over the course of 10 years. And as a result of this philosophy, I could stand up here and tell you more statistics, but one I think is very impactful. We have reduced the foster care population in this state since he took office by 47%. We believe that every life is a blessing. Every person deserves the opportunity to live up to their God-given potential, to be self-sufficient, to be happy, to not be stuck in a demoralizing culture of government dependency. And I'll spare you with a long-winded analysis of how Hope Florida operates and how we make it all come together, and we help guide people to economic self-sufficiency by using all of the wickets that are available, whether it's state government or local government, or like I said, the nonprofits and private sector. It's a really magical thing, which I think is a model for the nation, and it's thriving here in the Sunshine State. But let me just say this in closing. No matter the issue, no matter the policy proposal, there is a sense of pride, no matter where I travel, here across Florida and across the United States of America and beyond, when people say, I am a Floridian. Because being a Floridian symbolizes freedom, liberty, sanity, strength, success, and hope. People all across this world look to the free state of Florida as the shining light on the hill. A shining light that we must protect and one we must never take for granted. And let's make one thing clear. We would not be the free state. We would not be number one in so many categories if it were not for the courageous leadership of Ron DeSantis. On one of his final shows and one of his final broadcasts, I'll never forget, Rush Limbaugh said that Ron DeSantis has an ironclad spine of steel. And that is true, because you can hit that guy over the head with a 2x4 and he will just keep walking. He fights for what he knows in his heart to be true, and he does it without skipping a beat. Because at the end of the day, that's what elected leaders are supposed to do. Articulate your vision, explain why it matters, explain who you're fighting for and why. Have the strength and the courage to defend it, and never let the fear of pushback derail what you know in your heart to be right and to be just. And that is what I have witnessed from Ron DeSantis, who I will say is my best friend, my hero, and the GOAT. And with that, I will introduce him.
Well, thank you. Good evening and welcome to the free, red, and conservative state of Florida. You know, when I first ran for Congress years ago, I did a fundraiser, and the host of it, a special guest, was Lou Holtz, a famous football coach. And he did this introduction, great guy, but a great speaker. He did an introduction and turned it over to me, and I resolved I will never go after Lou Holtz ever again. And while I love my wife dearly, I hate having to go after her because she's so good at what she does. I want to thank Gay and Stanley Gaines of all the people that we have worked with in politics. I don't think you're going to find a better couple, and they're dear, dear friends, and probably some of the best friends we have in politics. So God bless both of you for that and all you've done for so many years. So I was watching last night's election, especially in New York City, and it brought to mind a debate that three of our founding fathers had. And it was a debate between Dr. Benjamin Rush, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. And the debate was about what was the world's oldest profession. And Dr. Rush, being a physician, said, well, the world's oldest profession is the physician, because it was the doctor. Eve came from Adam's rib. You had to have a doctor do that surgery. Thomas Jefferson, who people know, designed Monticello, University of Virginia, said no. The world's oldest profession, it was the architect, because it was the architect that brought order out of all the chaos in the universe. And Ben Franklin said, no, that's not right. The world's oldest profession is the politician. Who do you think created that chaos in the first place? Well, I think we're going to get a good reminder of that over the next 4 years in New York City. And I don't know whether I need to build a wall at I-95 or build more. I don't know, but I know I know it's going to be very impactful, and we're going to get a very good lesson of history that leftism, socialism, communism is always doomed to fail. Now, when I was last with National Review for the Palm Beach event you guys do, it was to honor, Gay was one of them, and the other honoree was a fellow that we miss dearly, Rush Hudson Limbaugh. And so, you know, I gave some introductory remarks as my first year as governor, and I made the statement at the time, and I think it's true, and I believe it to be true. You know, if you look at kind of modern conservatism and the modern conservative movement, I would say post-World War II, the 5 most influential conservatives have been Ronald Reagan, William F. Buckley, Justice Scalia, Justice Thomas, and Rush. At least for me, that would what it would be. And Rush was very thankful for that. You know, Rush was very humble. That was rarefied air, but he was very influential. We really miss him dearly. Now, I didn't know when growing up, I didn't know who William F. Buckley was. I didn't even know the difference between Democrat and Republican, to be quite frank. And then I show up, having grown up in Dunedin, Florida, my freshman year of college at Yale University, you know, on the baseball team, and I showed up because this is what we would wear in Tampa Bay, flip-flops and jean shorts and a cut-off T-shirt. That did not go over well with the Andover and Exeter kids who were a little bit different. That's okay, you know, culture shock. But I started going to school, and I was like, wait a minute, you know, and I'm thinking as 18 going there, I'm like, man, this is like, you know, a great school. All these great leaders have come from there. The motto, or one of the motto, is for God, for country, for Yale. I'm like, man, so I go there. And after like a few weeks in class, I'm like, for God, they hate God, they hate America. And I'd never seen anything like that. And people like, yeah, you need to read William F. Buckley, God and Man at Yale. And sure enough, he kind of nailed what was happening throughout the society at that time. And I think it's only gotten more serious since then. Now, the famous quote from William F. Buckley was that National Review would stand athwart history and yell, stop. And that was obviously something that needed to be done because you did see the advances of leftism. I had to approach things as governor a little bit differently because if I simply was content with stopping the left, that would have conceded that the left had control over every major institution in our society, and I was not willing to concede that. And so I didn't think it was enough to simply, in our day, stop the left. I thought that I must lead the effort to regain terrain and to make sure that we can restore the integrity of all these institutions in our society that have been corrupted by the left over the year. Our K-12 education system, our higher education system, even corporate America at the time, the bureaucracy, and on it goes. And so that was the task to make sure that we were protecting the people of this state from the pathologies of the left. And that required aggressive action, and we did. And now we delivered great results. And ultimately, when you get elected, you know, most voters would never come to a National Review event or on the left. They go about their lives. They're not as ideological. They're not following this every day. So the results are important because that ultimately what determines the direction. And if you look at what we've done, no state has delivered more conservative results than we have in the state of Florida. Just take our budget. The state of Florida now has almost 23.5 million residents. New York is the closest to us in population. They're about 19.5 residents, and yet, with millions more residents than New York, the state of Florida's budget is less than half of New York State's budget. Yet our roads are better, our schools are better, everything's safer. In fact, New York City, 8 million people, their budget is more than the budget of the entire state of Florida. And that doesn't even count Mandami socializing the grocery stores, so that's going to get even more. If you look at what we've done in the state of Florida, state for 180 years, take all the debt that the state government has accumulated over that time. Just since I've been governor, we've paid off almost 50% of the state's historical debt. We now have the lowest per capita debt of any state of the country. Economy, we are now ranked 3 years in a row by CNBC, the #1 economy amongst all 50 states. Trust me, CNBC would not want to rank Florida one if they can help it. And if you look at the amount of income and wealth that's moved into Florida since I've been governor, there has never been an example where more wealth and income have moved into another state over a similar period of time in all of American history than is what had happened in Florida over these last 6 years. Taxes. We have no income tax, and we never will as long as I have anything to say about that. And so it's interesting, California has the highest income tax, but they also have the highest sales tax. Our sales tax is 33% less than them. And yes, we are working on putting something on the ballot for our Florida residents and their homesteaded properties to actually make sure you own your home free and clear of the government without them using it as an ATM. So stay tuned on that. Our K-12 system, Florida has the #1 school choice in all of the United States of America. We have 1.7 million students on various school choice programs. Some of it's private scholarships. Yeah, we've got over 500,000 on that. But we also have charter schools, which are public schools. Then we have choice within our school districts. If you just take our charter school population, it's about 400,000 students. That's more than the total K-12 population of half the states in this country. And this is disproportionately low income, demographically different than some of the other parts of the state. But if you just took those 400,000 charter students and did their performance, they would rank in the top 5 for student performance if they were their own state in this country. And that just shows you that what we're doing works. Law and order. We have a 50-year low in the crime rate in the state of Florida. And I'm the only governor in America that has removed Soros-backed prosecutors from their offices. We have fought the left in our higher education system, and they just did rankings in the Wall Street Journal based off free speech, lack of ideology, all the things that we want schools to be graded on, and University of Florida ranked as the #1 university in this country. And it's because we've really leaned in on the reforms. And oh, by the way, first state in the country to eliminate DEI from our higher education system. And I think the only state in the country that to this day, all tenured professors now must undergo review every 5 years and can be terminated for poor performance. I got elected very narrowly, as my wife mentioned, and the state has always been viewed as purple, and yet we did what was right, and we enacted the strongest pro-life protections that have ever been done in the state of Florida's history, and we enacted the most sweeping parental rights legislation of any place in the United States. Every parent in Florida has a right to send their kids to elementary school without having them be taught that their gender is a choice or that they were born in the wrong body. We've been the most aggressive state in America on combating illegal immigration. I had boats down in the Florida Keys because Biden wasn't doing his job. We sent people to the southern border to help Texas. We even transported 50 to beautiful Martha's Vineyard. And they said in Florida you couldn't be strong on immigration because we have a high Latino population. And I parlayed that in 22 into the biggest victory with Hispanics that any Republican has ever had in state history, 62%. We also nuked things like ESG and woke capitalism. The reality is you have a responsibility as a publicly traded company to maximize the value of your shareholders. Going on ideological escapades, and we even had to stand up to a company that's got a pretty well-known reputation in Central Florida, and we stood up and we won that battle. And now woke capitalism is on the defensive. So those are just great achievements. It's made a difference in people's lives. But it's not just about even doing that. We haven't just won superficial victories. We have neutered and defanged the left in this state more than has ever been done in any states. Just look at what we've done with teacher unions. Yeah, we have universal school choice. Yeah, I made sure kids were in school during COVID, but we also instituted paycheck protection for teacher union dues. No automatic deductions. You got to write a check if you want to do it. And guess what? Most teachers are not, and these unions are being decertified all across the state of Florida. Trial lawyers boondoggle with what they do, and Florida was one of the worst states. They funnel the money to Democrat politicians. We did massive tort reform. It's changed the trajectory of the state. I'm actually now, these insurance companies are rebating, like Progressive's doing $1 billion, all this stuff. And it was all because we got the litigation under control, but it's also deprived the left of a key source of revenue. Higher education, what we've done to make sure that we're filtering out professors. You know, we filtered out a lot of these activist professors, and the media will say, oh, there's a brain drain from Florida, professors are leaving. Let me tell you, if Marxist professors are leaving Florida, that is not a bad thing for Florida. That is a good thing for Florida. We enacted the strongest measures for election integrity in the country. And, you know, a lot of people forget Bush versus Gore, they remember 2000. It was a total Charlie Foxtrot. I got elected in 18. My opponent conceded on election night. I was winning by 1%, which is a typical Florida margin at the time, 80,000 votes or whatever. We had U.S. Senate race, some of these others that were less. And they didn't get called. And so, you know, I'm going about my business. Hey, I just got elected governor. Next day, I'm going out. Then next day, I get a call. Palm Beach and Broward are putting more votes in. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, you went from 80,000 to 60. I was like, wait a minute. Then you go to 40, then 30. So when I came in, we removed the supervisors of Palm Beach and Broward counties, and we enacted an office in state government that actually prosecutes voter fraud. So if you vote in two places, if you're an illegal alien, all that, we've got you and we're doing it. And then, so we've been, and I'll talk about the political success in a minute, but by the time we got to after 22, when I got reelected big, you know, we had decimated the Democratic Party. So they didn't really have an avenue. We had defanged the left in the state. And so the avenue that they sought to try to change Florida was through these constitutional initiative process. And so they put on the ballot, and these became the two most expensive initiatives in the history of the American Republic. Amendment 3, which was a constitutional right to smoke weed wherever you want, and Amendment 4, which was abortion till birth and allowed abortions to be performed by non-physicians. So really as radical as it do, and if those would have passed, that would obviously have changed the underlying dynamics in the state and ultimately would have turned Florida purple and then blue. And so combined, the left spent $275 million to try to change our Constitution and really change the trajectory of the state. So as governor, I didn't have a formal role in it, but I fought like hell to be able to do it because I'm thinking to myself, what good is it to go through this, win elections, do the policy, if they can just do Soros's agenda through the back door with these initiatives? So we were the first state to beat a marijuana initiative, and we were the first state to beat an abortion till birth initiative in 24. We beat the left at that. Very important. So what's the result of all this? And I think it's important because, you know, a lot of people, these political consultants will say, and I got this advice when I got elected, hey, it's a purple state. You know, you got to be careful, right? it's a very delicate balance. Almost every election for a decade or more was at one point in Florida. And they're like, if you're too conservative, you're going to end up repelling voters. And I understood that, but ultimately I rejected that. And the reason is I got elected to lead. I didn't get elected to follow. And I've never taken a poll the entire time I've been governor. Part of it is because what's the poll going to tell me? The poll can't change what I believe, so I got to do what's right. I got to set the course, and I deliver results. And even if the people weren't with you at the start, and they weren't with me during COVID at first, very unpopular, the decisions I was making, and yet, now no one will admit they opposed me during those early days of COVID, right? So that's just what it is. So you can't get caught in the moment. You can't be afraid of your own shadow. You have to do. But what it's shown now, when I got elected, we had 300,000 more registered Democrats in this state than Republicans. The state of Florida had never had more registered Republicans than Democrats in its history. By the time I ran for re-election, we had flipped that. 300,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. Oh man, isn't that great? And we were able to win with that 300,000 registration advantage by a record 1.5 million vote margin, the largest Republican victory in the history of the state in a governor's race. And that's great. And we won majority of women. I won single women, which they say you can't win as a Republican. We won 62% of Latinos, all this other stuff, and independents, all this stuff. Today, though, so I think my election was is this really real in Florida? People didn't know. Once that big election happened, then it was kind of the floodgates. So it was 300,000 advantage then. Today it's 1.4 million more registered Republicans and Democrats. We've never had a shift that far in favor of Republicans over that period of time in modern American history. Get this, because a lot of my supporters are worried about, we love what you're doing, but stop attracting people here. You're making it too. And all of a sudden I said, well, listen, I'm not asking anybody to come here. I don't go recruit because, honestly, businesses call me and they want to come, all this stuff. So I don't do that. But there's a concern. I remember during COVID, we had this massive influx. We're seeing New York plates, which in Palm Beach you normally see. We started seeing California license plates. That freaked everybody out. They're like, oh my gosh, we're going to import Berkeley to Sarasota? That is not going to end well for us. And so it was, it was a one-point state. So if you get that, they would even go to the supermarket and they would put flyers. These are like my supporters. They put flyers in the windshield with the New York and California plates. Don't vote here like people vote there. And so there was a big concern about the migration shifting the state more liberal. Here's the fact. Since I've been governor, if you look at all 49 other states and you take each state individually, all 49 states, if you look at who's moved from Florida from there, have had more Republicans than Democrats move to Florida. Vermont, New York, Illinois, California, Washington State, it doesn't matter, all 49. And so it has actually helped facilitate, more conservative governance. And get this, it wasn't just migration. People that were Democrat in Florida when I got elected were 3 times more likely to switch to Republican than vice versa. That's how we won Miami-Dade by double digits. That's how I was the first Republican to win Palm Beach in 40 years. So, but it's important to know how we did that. We did it by flying under a banner of bold colors, not pale pastels. As President Reagan said, we drew a sharp contrast with the left, and we made it very clear that voters had a very stark choice, and they chose us 60-40. There's a lesson in that. People don't want milquetoast. They don't want poll-driven politicians. They don't want people that are afraid of their own shadow. I do things as a leader that some people don't agree with, but they know I'm leading and doing what I promised I would do, and they respect that. And that's how all these Republicans should act, and they would do much better as a result. So the thing about Florida is, William F. Buckley, the debates he's having with these leftists through the years, all this stuff. We just had, particularly since COVID, a real-world experiment between conservative governance in Florida and leftist governance in California, in Illinois, in New York. And the results show undeniably conservatism works. When it's properly applied, it delivers positive results for the people that we were elected to serve. And you cannot dispute the results. The results not only statistically, but even close your eyes to all that. People vote with their feet in this country. They have fled those leftist states, and they have sought refuge here in the free state of Florida. So the question is, what do you take from that going forward? And I will say, I see some of the stuff that goes on now in whatever kind of the right-wing echo chamber or ecosphere is, and it brings to mind an old adage that all great causes start as a movement, transform as a business, and ultimately degenerate as a racket. I think we're in the racket phase of a lot of what's going on in the right. Are we believing in conservative principles because they're true, or are we shifting those principles to try to catch fire with the Twitter algorithm or to be able to monetize the advocacy? And so I think we've got a lot of work going forward to make sure that these principles are upheld. And so some of the things I would say, one of the secrets to our success is we cede no issues to the left. We offer conservative solutions for every issue that people care about. Take environment and conservation. The left is all about saying the world's going to end because of global warming or climate change. I have my staff collect throughout history. CBS News, 1977. The state of Florida is projected to be underwater by 1985. No, it didn't happen. 1989, ABC News. The state of Florida is going to be underwater. No, it doesn't happen. So, and interesting, Bill Gates has now said, climate alarm, don't worry about that, or maybe, because he wants more energy for his data centers and the AI stuff. So it's convenient. I guess saving the world can wait. They got to do more profits. But we've seen them go kooky on that. We're very strong on energy. We eliminated any reference to climate ideology in our energy policy. But what we did do is we are succeeding in creating the largest environmental restoration in the history of the United States by restoring Florida's Everglades. I'm getting that done, not the Democrats. I'm doing it. And people appreciate it cross-party. You look at education. We did the universal school choice. I believe in that. But I also know that most families in Florida, even with universal choice, still choose to go to a public school. And so as we're marginalizing the teacher unions, we created a special fund for teacher salaries. Because, you say teachers need more, you send money, they spend it on bureaucracy. We made sure it can only be spent on teacher salaries. So now those teachers that want to go in, they're thanking us for being able to support. And that's charter school teachers as well. So we beat the left on education. And as my wife said on child welfare, we know that these great society approaches don't work. And so there's a temptation to just say, and hit it, we don't like it. Yeah, fine. But what's your alternative? And so what she did with Hope Florida was recognize we have so many resources exterior to government. So when somebody now goes in for child welfare services, their needs get put into something called the care portal. We have churches that are plugged in, charities, businesses, individual volunteers. Guess what? When that needs goes out to the church, if the church is there to lift somebody up, that's not creating a dependency culture. That's creating a culture that's going to lead to independence. That's why we've gotten 33,000 people off means-tested welfare. We didn't cut, quote unquote, any of the programs. We've transcended the need for the programs and done better than the left has ever been able to do. The other thing that's important to do as conservatives is we must be firm in rejecting big government. Now, we see Mendami last night say there's no problem too big for government that government can't solve, and no problem too small that government shouldn't have its beak in somehow, and which brings to mind President Reagan, the most terrifying words in the English language. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. So we know that that doesn't work. And if you think about why those voters were felt disenfranchised, why they voted the way they did, some of it's just the education system. There's a lot of people complaining about affordability. Why do we have issues with inflation and affordability? Because of the government, because of the COVID spending, because of the Biden stimulus, because of the lockdowns and the supply chain disruptions. Government big government policy has created the crunch that so many people are feeling throughout this country. So let's recognize that that fails and not repeat these mistakes. You also look at the size and scope of the bureaucracy. Now, President Trump is right to reinsert control over the executive branch. The founders created 3 branches of government. You're either in the legislative branch, the judicial. If you're not in any of those 2, you got to be in the executive branch. The president has every right to make sure that those bureaucrats are faithfully executing the policies of the administration. I know there's going to be stuff in the courts that are going to come out, but having a 4th branch of government is not consistent with our Constitution and what the Founding Fathers envisioned. And I'm glad that we finally have a president that's trying to do something about it. The other thing we have to say, because you're starting to see this, there's just a Wall Street Journal, OpenAI wants federal backstop for all their data centers. How about this? No. No more too big to fail. We are not going to let them say they're systemically important, that the taxpayers have to come bail them out, privatize gains and socialize losses. That's how you end up electing more Mendamis, and conservatives need to stand against it. The other thing we have to make clear is, we have a very dangerous world. And I think William F. Buckley was very clear-eyed on this because, he didn't embrace military adventurism. He didn't embrace socially engineering foreign societies like we've tried to do, over the last quarter century, and we shouldn't do that. And we got to be very judicious about how we utilize American military might. But you have to have a foreign policy, and you have to understand that the way to deter conflict is through strength. And if there's times where you have to act like President Trump did by taking out the Iran nuclear reactor, you do it, and people will be safer as a result. We are inviting less conflict when we're strong. Immigration. There's a lot to be said about illegal immigration, stop the border, do the deportations. We're obviously supportive of that. We created Alligator Alcatraz, and we got these other things, and we've led the nation in that, and we're happy to do that. And, honestly, a lot of these people have already been ordered to be deported through the immigration system. They've had crimes, all this stuff. And so it's the right thing to do for Floridians. But we can't also, as conservatives, say, oh, yeah, all illegal immigration is bad. All legal immigration is good no matter what. No. Immigration, if it benefits the American people, fine. If you're doing things that are displacing jobs, if you're doing things that are detracting from culture, that is not. There are great things to have Elon Musk having got a visa, to have an O visa for Shohei Ohtani. Yeah, I'm all for that. But do you want to do mass importation of people that elect representatives like Ilhan Omar? That is not good for the American people. We need people that are culturally compatible. As Teddy Roosevelt said, we have one culture. It's the American culture. People that come need to want to be a part of that culture, not want to detract from that culture. And I think that that's very important, and it's very intellectually lazy to say that every single legal immigration program is benefiting the American people, because we know some of them have undercut Americans. Now, we're supportive of one culture, this whole idea of, diversity is the strength or whatever. Look, I believe you can be a great American coming from different walks of life, but you got to want to embrace the American creed. You got to want to be a part of our culture. So it's a cultural thing. It's not saying that you're this color, you're that color. We're not going to go down the road of kind of this warmed over anti-Semitism. That's a dead end for conservatism, but we do need to have assimilation. We need to have a unified culture, but ultimately, as conservatives, we treat people as individuals, not as members of groups, and that has got to be the way going forward. The final thing that we need to grapple with is what is going on with artificial intelligence. And I don't think it's a conservative approach to say that Silicon Valley should simply be able to run wild. They are seeking unprecedented special privileges and special favors. They had a provision that got stripped out to have a 10-year moratorium on any regulation by the state government, stripping our right to be able to protect Floridians. They're getting unique tax and regulatory breaks all across the country. So just understand, this is not purely market-driven. This is driven in large part by rent-seeking, and now you have OpenAI saying we need a federal backstop for all the stuff that we're doing. That is not the way to go. We must say no to too big to fail. We must make people rise and fall based on what they're doing. But there is going to be need to make sure that individuals have protections. I mean, think about National Review. There's people in this AI space that don't believe in copyright. They think they should just be able to take this, no IP, no copyright, and be able to put whatever they want in their models. I don't think that that's good for this society. I think the founders put copyright in the Constitution for a reason. We have to be able to do that. You also have just the backdrop of what the Founding Fathers were trying to do when they created this country. And when they framed the Constitution, they were very concerned with concentrated power. Now, in those days, they were not thinking about technology companies, artificial intelligence. They were thinking about government power and what government could do. And so they wanted to make sure they understood human nature is what it is. It doesn't change. There's nothing new under the sun. People are apt to abuse power. So you divide power in different branches. You create checks and balances. We are now in a situation where some of these big companies, the market cap in NVIDIA is more than every GDP in this world except like 4 or 5 companies. You have some of these others that have more power than governments have ever wielded in many aspects of American life. And so I think it's important as conservatives that we make sure we're steering things in ways that will enhance the human experience, not supplant the human experience. We cannot relinquish our responsibility to think for ourselves. We cannot let a handful of people in Silicon Valley create an alternative reality that distorts what it means to be an American and be a citizen of this republic. This is kind of in its opening stages. This is going to continue to be a major issue, but I can tell you in the state of Florida, we're going to make sure we're standing up for individual freedom and individual rights, and if they come asking for special privileges for us, they are not going to be warmly received. So we're here on the verge of America's 250th anniversary, and we're getting ready to celebrate that in July. In fact, Gay, she used to do the thing at Mount Vernon. She got us a George Washington statue that I put in the Florida Capitol. You know, a lot of these blue states are taking down statues of the Founding Fathers. I'm here putting them up in different parts of Florida. So we got the Washington. I've got Ben Franklin in Franklin County, Florida. I've got Jefferson in Jefferson County. I'm working on Hamilton. And, you know, we're buying these at a discount because they're in the basement in these blue states. It's great. Like, you get Hamilton for $30,000. It should cost more. So we're doing all that. And actually, I told New York, you know, Mindami wants to take, and I know it's not the Founding Fathers, but it led to the Founding Fathers. You know, if he wants to take down the Columbus statue, I will take it in Florida, and I'll put it up here somewhere. We'll do it. We'll get it done. But as we do that, I think it's important to reflect, and I want a lot of young people to reflect. That's why we're working really hard in Florida. What did the Founding Fathers do? What does the founding of the United States of America mean in the broad sweep of human history? And I think it's one of the most significant events, certainly in the last 2,000 years. You think about it. When they went to Independence Hall to sign the Declaration of Independence, these people had everything to lose. They were very successful. They were movers and shakers in the colonies. The things they were objecting to were more principled than anything. I mean, honestly, those taxes now, we wouldn't even think, you know, matter. It was relatively small compared, but it was a principle. And they thought that if they let the camel's nose under the tent, that they wouldn't have freedom. So they stood and they signed and pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, knowing full well that if their revolution failed, the result, 100% for every one of them, was death. And so this was the real deal. This isn't just emoting on social media. They took a stand knowing there would be serious consequences. And they turned, really, the vision of government on its head. No, power doesn't come from the government to the people. Power comes from God to the individual, and then the people loan that power to government to protect the rights we already possess. Huge revolution in thinking. And then they won the war very improbably, and then they're kind of sputtering, so like, you know what, we need a constitution. So they meet in Philadelphia again, 10, 11 years later, and they work and hammer out this Constitution. And so after that, Benjamin Franklin's walking out of Independence Hall, and he's asked, Dr. Franklin, did you give us a republic or a monarchy? And Franklin's response was, a republic if you can keep it. They understood you could have the best Constitution in the world, you could have the best Declaration of Independence in the world. These things do not run on autopilot. They require every generation of Americans to step up and defend freedom when it's threatened, sometimes even putting on a uniform, risking your life, and even giving the last full measure of devotion for service to this country. So the experiment in liberty is ongoing. We're constantly answering this question that the Founding Fathers asked themselves. Can people really govern themselves? Can you have a society in which the rights are God-given, not government-granted? Can you have the rule of law rather than the individual men? Can you actually have limited government? And they believe, and I believe, the United States of America will ultimately answer that question once and for all. So we are called upon, in my role, what we do as governor, what National Review does, what other folks throughout the conservative movement do, we're called upon to preserve what George Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. That was the fire that burned in Independence Hall in 1776 when these brave men signed the Declaration of Independence. It was the fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863 when our nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's the fire that burned on the beaches of Normandy when a merry band of brothers stormed the shore, defeated Nazism, and helped save the world. It's a fire that burned at the gates of the Berlin Wall, which we saw there when a brave president stood up and said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. This is the responsibility that we have as Floridians, as Americans, to carry that torch and to preserve that sacred fire of liberty. I don't want to speak for anyone. I miss Rush dearly. I miss William F. Buckley. But I think both of them would look to the state of Florida and say, you know what? You guys are doing it right. You're showing that conservatism is the way to go. So thank you all. It's an honor to receive this award. God bless you, and enjoy your time in the free and red state of Florida. Thank you very much.